Okay, we are being recorded. So, we're back. Welcome, Secret of Light group. We have Yannick on the phone. He's at work, so he's going to be listening but not chiming in. Today we are going to move on to chapter 7.
Wuhan, you said?
Wuhan? We're going to move on.
Oh, what the fuck?
What's he hearing?
MoveOn.org. We're going to move on. Chapter 7, Knowledge versus Thinking.
Yeah.
So, as you know, the chapter, we're in omniscience here and knowing. So, knowledge versus thinking.
Oh, that's where we're at. Sorry. I was skipped. I was already at the next chapter.
No. So, what is man's knowledge and what is man's thinking? From page 38, we have man's knowledge is his power. Man's thinking is the expression of that power.
For some reason, it's as if that slide is smaller than last week. I mean, Jesus, I mean, I'd have to have a,
Okay, hold on.
sorry, the words are too small. Sorry.
What's a college? Is that like a college? College?
A college.
College.
Okay, hold on.
KOWLEDG.
Mhm.
Fuck, did I get this
Mhm.
Okay.
wrong?
Are you talking about-
I'm trying to move your telegram. I can't understand. It's not clicking.
He's just trying to expand the slide so
Okay.
we can,
Oh, no,
Is that better now?
No, that's fine.
not really. As tiny as can be. I don't know what to tell you. I'm going to have to, I don't know. Let me see if I can do something on my end.
How's that? Is that better?
Yes. Much
Yeah,
better.
that's getting there. It's getting there. Phew.
Getting there, that's big. I can see it from across the room now.
Yeah,
No,
I
no,
think
it's
he's
pretty big.
laughing.
Yeah.
I don't know if he's laughing with us. I hope so.
I'm laughing. Oh, you Yannick? Okay. So what we have here is what is man's knowledge and what is man's thinking.
Mhm.
Man's knowledge is his power. Man's thinking is the expression of that power. Any comments on that?
And which one is this? Is this 1, 2, or 3? Sorry.
Chapter 7, number 1.
Exactly.
Okay, thank you.
I always get confused. I thought he said something about you have no knowledge, that it's God's knowledge. I must be confusing this with something else.
Well, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to go ahead and bring up my slide that I created because I think that it actually.
I like that one. I was looking at that on the Telegram site.
I put together this slide here because it really, I know that Doc, you had those questions earlier, and I think that to really kind of look at where we are today and what we've gone through and what this slide is a lot of the answers to the questions that we've covered put into more of a sequential diagram because that is how men think and that's how we understand. And it may be a little bit more consumable if we actually look at this diagram. So what we have here is the cause, and we have cause and effect. And what the cause is God. And within the cause, we have God's imagining. So what we've learned in the past from previous was that all imagining is God's imagining. All forms are in the electric recordings of God's imagining and have no existence. So we have God's imagining, but within that is you see this little clouded box here, which I'm calling God's mind. So God's mind encompasses all of this, all things. But within God's mind, it begins.
Where does it say God's mind? I'm sorry. God's
Right.
mind is the matter up at the
Yeah,
top?
On the
yeah,
top.
at the top. And I see this little arrow. I just put an arrow to this kind of
Yes,
box,
yes.
just to kind of say, this is God's mind, this box. And because God's mind is everything. There is nothing without God's mind. So everything in here is part of God's mind. So it starts off with the cause, which is God's imagining. So all imagining is God's imagining. So within God, all imagining is from God. And then all forms are the electric recordings of God's imagining. So as we get down to forms and structure, it's just an electric recording. So what this is the yin and yang. This is the two lights. This is the male, female, but it is just black and white because this is the still magnetic light.
Yeah.
Universe of God's knowing. So we have God's knowing. So what we've discussed in the past is that there is knowing and there is thinking, and then there's what we perceive as mind. So God's knowing is what we would call truth. It is intuition, it's clairvoyance, it's what our conscious mind already knows. And a lot of the Walter Russell writings, he says that there is one knowing, and we kind of go and we learn from books and people and texts to unlearn what we already know as clairvoyance or as type of a gut feeling that we know what is real and what is true. So within that is what we call the magnetic mind of God. That's the magnetism, the still magnetic light universe of God's knowing, which is invisible, unchanging, unconditional, and unmeasurable. And we got conception belongs solely to the magnetic God light and never becomes matter. So within this God light, this is not matter, it's just the knowing. And from this God light, from this proceedeth from the magnetic, which is also a pulse, the two sexed lights, but they're still black and white. Okay, this is where it comes from. Now, once these proceedeth from God as a pulse, then that pulse becomes to man where we get the red shift and the blue shift, which is in the mind of man. If you see here, I kind of, this is man here. This is the form of man with this yin yang with the red and the blue is actually kind of his mind. And from and from that mind, from the red blue shift, proceedeth his thinking divides the qualities of the stillness of spirit into quantities of parts and sets them flowing. So as this pulse comes from the mind of God, from God's knowing, it comes to us where we actually have this redshift, blueshift, which then this breaks down into multiple colors. And then that will proceed through electric, through a wave, into physical matter. So from these two pairs up here, so right here I have cause, and then we have effect. This is God's imagining God, and this whole thing is God's mind. So within God's mind, we have man's mind. And the two pairs of opposite conditioned light pressures, and then into countless octave wave units of light pressures, and set in opposite directional motion to create the illusion of sequence, change, and time. So as this pulse of knowing radiates out to man, we then break those qualities into quantities, and then those quantities manifest into matter. But the problem that we have is that we have this thing called the body. And what this body is like a big old probe. It's always out feeling, and so within this, it's not just the body, but we'd have the eyes, hearing, smell, feeling, touching, those type of things. And what it says is that we are insulated from source by the electrical conditioned body, which we wrongly think of as the mind. So as we're getting all this sensory perception through our physical senses of the body, we form memories. And then from memories, we form experiences. And from experiences, we form opinions. And then we begin to think and dwell on those opinions and ideas. But that is not the knowing that's coming from God. That is what's coming from our sensing, which we wrongly construe as the mind. But it's really just kind of an elaborate concept of what we've experienced and what we think may happen. So we're projecting into the future, we're despairing in the past, and we're not living concurrently within the knowledge of God.
It's like a
Sounds
story
pretty-
running in our head.
Excuse me?
It's like a story running in our heads. eh?
Correct. It's the play that's playing out on the earth, right? And I kind of like to say that everything that I sense, I create. Everything I know is from God. So everything that's before me that I see, that I touch, that I feel, that I smell, I've created from the knowing and the imagining of God. But I've created that. And I have to rest in the knowledge that I know that it came from God's imagining and God's thinking.
Did you see the comment from Yannick? It's so true what he said.
No, I do not see the comment. Is it,
Yeah, it just popped up for us. So
was it on chat?
it's in the chat. Yeah, that's how he communicates with us. Yeah. Whoop.
Well, thank you.
Oh yeah, like I feel like you've absorbed this. Like whoa.
Well, again, for me, I'm an architect, right? So I like to have pictures. I love pictures, right? And I like to put things in sequence and order. And I will have to say that Santos helped me. Some of this has a lot of Santos in it, the Red Blueshift. I've been
Okay.
listening to him quite a bit.
Mm.
Because what happens is, and again, I don't know if this diagram's correct, right? It's kind of just what I'm thinking and what, because I know that, and Doc, you've said that what's thinking, what's God doing, and so forth and so on. But in order to get to this spectral rainbow light, we actually have to go through the Redshift Blueshift first. And then from that, we can then begin to form all these qualities, which then become quantities. And that's when we have this electric, right? Because as we see here at the bottom, it says conception belongs solely to the magnetic God light and never becomes matter. So if from this light, we're not going to, how do we get matter then? How does conception become matter? Well, it becomes matter through our thinking, through man. Now, I don't know if God, by saying that, does God need man to create these things? Or does God need some type of being, right, to create the different planes of existence?
Oh, so Dak wants in again.
Okay, hold on.
He says he says you don't hear me or something. He got disconnected, and then remember last time you had to accept his phone call or something, but it doesn't say that.
Okay, let's see here. Participants, Doc. Okay, there he is. Sorry, Doc. Sorry, Doc. Didn't mean to. Maybe you dropped off or something.
Yeah, he dropped off. Yeah. You're muted, Doug, right now.
I'm so sorry.
That's okay. So, with that being said, I don't know if maybe in the different planes, each of the different beings create that. That's why maybe we can't see into those planes, because that's not being created by us and not within our sense path. But it is interesting that this conception belongs solely to the magnetic God light and never becomes matter. We also have here that the electric awareness of motion simulating the spiritual qualities of the one idea by creating imagined quantities of separate forms which seem to have substance. So, again, one of the main ideas that Walter Russell wanted to really express was that man's power lies in his centering self and not in the motion, which is this effect, which is as above, so below, right? So as above is the cause, as below is the effect, right? He must become aware of the cosmic light of God in him, which is this black and white light that he's bringing into him, and then he's converting it into this matter. So you must be aware of this pulse, of this magnetic pulse in us. You must also know the universe is an electrically projected spectrum colored light and sound wave motion picture. What is real, cause or effect? Cause, effect is a simulation. So this electrically projected light, which is the colored light and sound wave motion picture. So we're projecting this, right? And we're seeing this as reality. But this is not our knowing. This is our thinking. So the knowing is more like, I would kind of say it's like, when you throw a pebble into a pond, the magnetic knowing of God is the pebble. And when it hits that light, or it hits that pond, which is us, those ripples then begin to appear. And those ripples then create our reality.
Well, what we believe is reality.
Mm-hmm. Correct.
Well, also what we help create, because every day we're in relationship with others, and depending what we say or what we not say, something amazing can come out of it, or something not so hot, So,
but I guess the question is that no matter, say, even now as we speak to each other, am I creating this reality, right? Is this really my reality that I'm creating, so that no matter what happens? And this gets a lot, I think, down into when we start, because as for me, as I begin to study more and more, I would say esoterics, or say Steiner or Santos even, or Walter Russell or Ibrahim Karim, that the one thing that really kind of affects me is the idea of evil. Because Walter Russell states there is no evil, only good. Ibrahim Karim says the same thing. But when we get into Steiner and also into Santos, they create cosmologies and philosophies with a lot of evil in them.
You mean like Santos does? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, like when you get into the archons and aramons and things like with Steiner, there's this whole kind of evil realm that is created. And again, I don't know. I'm just saying, I'm just throwing something out there that, because I know definitely Walter Russell says there is no evil, only good. The Bible says that God creates nothing, except for our own good. If all things are God's mind, right? If all things are in this box encompasses both good and evil.
Yeah. In what I studied, we never call it good and evil. We can, you can have dark and light, but what we got was that what we think of as evil or ideas that are it's ideas or thoughts that no longer serve the current evolution of humanity right now. So something that was good 10 years ago, 15, 50 years, well, today we will have progressed closer to the light and will no longer serve for us. So you could call that evil if you like, but it's like, but yeah, it's also when that wave comes into our world, it's not intentional, but it's not going to resonate the right way. So it may create unintended form or whatever. So yeah, I guess we could call that evil. But
well, my question is though, let's say from this diagram here where we have all conception belongs solely to the magnet. All conception belongs solely to the magnetic God light. So as this light proceedeth, right, the pulse, are all things that come to us from God, or is there an intermediary between God and ourselves that changes the pulse, or are all these things created after we receive the pulse from God? That's the question. And
why does that matter?
Excuse me?
Why does that matter? I'm serious.
Well, I guess the reason it matters is because as we look at the world, as we look at as we create our perception of the world, are we creating it or are we victims of it? Because if we're creating it all, then we are no longer a victim of anything, and we are the most omniscient, powerful, and omnipotent beings that there are. And all the things that we may think are affecting us won't if we change the wave that we're putting forth. Because sometimes when I read or see certain things, it appears that we're in a world again where there's this evil and there's a lot of things happening, and it, from what I'm seeing here, we're creating it all. And that's just, so why does it matter to me? Well, it matters to me on how I perceive the world. So, and again, I'm not saying that that's right or wrong. I'm just saying from this diagram, the more I study this, the more I begin to think what it is I'm creating all the time. So with that, let's get back.
yeah, I mean,
Huh? Go ahead.
yeah, I'm just, we got to remember when it comes to the man's mind, us, we're given free will. And whatever level that we've reached or that we're able to, at that very moment, when that, whatever our next action, as good as it's going to get, is based on where we're at and how present we are. And so I think our lens can sometimes be obscured, and we may not, well, we're not going to express the best quality at that moment. But over time, as we make mistake or do good things, we actually know when it is good. Good meaning it creates harmony. I don't know how to describe it, but so when you said, yeah, like we're responsible for our thoughts, and our words have a lot of impact out there, which is one thing, is something we don't learn. Like as we speak it, it has an impact. Well, obviously because of the wave and all this, but has an impact anyway.
Yannick has
What's
written
that?
in the chat, he said, good and evil are concepts of the duality. If we are to get down to the ultimate, it's all God.
Mhm.
And God is having infinite dreams of experience to the point where he has chosen to forget himself and will play out all roles of experience. So I think that's kind of where I'm getting to here.
Mhm.
But so the reason I did the diagram was mainly to actually kind of put it a little bit into a more of a sequence that may help
Mhm.
see how it translates from mind of God to matter. And hopefully that was helpful.
Oh yeah.
So let's go back to our questions here. And let's see if I can actually zoom in a little bit better. How's that? Is that better?
Oh yeah. Oh my God, what a difference.
Uh, so,
I
So
mean, I
he
can
just
see it.
was. That's he
I can
did
actually see it.
Oh, you're drunk.
so let's
Hmm.
revisit question 1, which is, what is man's knowledge and what is man's thinking? So man's knowledge, as we say, which is the mind of God, is his power. Man's thinking is the expression of that power. So if we are in alignment with God and with God's mind, and our thinking is in alignment with God's knowledge and then that thinking would express that power. But if man doesn't have knowledge, if he just has information, which is from learning and books, then he can't express his power through his thinking. Any comments on that?
Negative or positive?
Either way.
I think, like, if I look at my dad, who only had a grade 8 education, carpenter, construction worker, foreman, he knew more about, if you like, common sense and life than people that came out of university, for example. And I'm not saying, you don't need that for certain, all I'm thinking is this is available to anybody.
Mm-hmm.
Huh?
Mm-hmm.
And we see it, like, people can be a painter in your place and they're just painting the wall. And I remember this guy telling me when he paints, it's like meditation for him, as an example.
If you're present.
Yeah.
And that's one thing that I found, because like I said, I've gone, I'm both a contractor and an architect, but recently I've been getting back into actually doing the work myself. And when you do the work yourself, you are so present. I mean, one, because if you're handling a saw, you don't want to be thinking about tomorrow, you're going to lose a finger, right? So you have to be very present when you're actually,
Nice.
when you're working. And the reason I did that was because as an architect, I was getting way too far out.
Yeah.
I was getting way out in the future to way too much, because that's what you're doing. You're planning all the time. You're not really doing. And so for me, I really had to get centered in the present. And so it is like meditation. And one thing I found was I was having a really hard time. For one, it's physical labor, and I wasn't used to the physical labor itself. It's one thing to think about it, it's one thing to draw or do. It's another thing where you actually have to perform physically on something. And your body has to be prepared to do that. But I did find that through breathing, I was able to accomplish a lot more by really concentrating when I was getting tired or frustrated, to change my breathing, and I could actually work much better in the present.
I can't wait to hear what Troy Casey's going to give us tomorrow.
It'd be fun.
Well, I'm just saying, if you're talking about breathing, well, he's not Wim Hof, but that's neat.
When you're into something that intense, when you can focus, let's say, and you're deep into the work, that's God's work. That's God working, not you.
Exactly. And I think that's what I'm trying to get at actually is
Well, I mean, if that's what we're going after, good, because I got that.
Yeah.
I mean, I
Well-
understand that, you know, like a guy who's doing, you know, cutting a record, you know, a disc jockey, whatever you call them today. All right, there's electric, you know, I mean, sometimes this friend of mine is there for days even, you know, and you're just so in the zone.
So Yannick is saying LOL, okay?
Mhm.
That's good.
Well, I know. I mean,
So I think that as we experience this and talk about this, we're really starting to develop what it is that Walter Russell's talking about. Because that's where, you know, Walter was in that zone, right? When he was doing his sculptures, and he was really just kind of being the conduit to God, and his hands were just working. Okay, let's go on to number 2. How does thinking divide knowledge? And this was again in my diagram. His thinking divides the qualities of the stillness of spirit into quantities of parts and sets them flowing. So the spirit is the stillness. And then his thinking, meaning man's thinking, divides those qualities into quantities.
we have a message from Jeremy. He's just saying, hi, sorry, I wasn't able to make it today. We'll try for, I guess, next week or something.
Looks that way.
Yeah, he's just sent us a message.
Mhm. That was in the Secret of Light group. That was
Yeah.
in the
Yeah, I
Untitled.
guess.
So I think the diagram actually, you know, showed this pretty well. Let's go back to the diagram here.
Mhm.
So here's the diagram as we talked about, right? So as we get here, that's where I have this at. His thinking divides the qualities of the stillness of spirit into the quantities and parts and sets them flowing. So as the pulse hits the water, becomes the wave then begins to create the octaves of the colors or sound, which then is translated into, so thinking converts matter due to time and space into this electric wave of effect or matter.
So I think the clearer, the clearer our body, you know,
Mhm.
in all levels, being thought, astral,
Mhm.
physical,
Mhm.
can help us. I'll say we can be a better conductor.
Well, I think that we can. I think our ability to conduct is, again, what separates us from source. We are insulated from source, right down here underneath the man, by the electrical conditioned body. So the dirtier our body is, right, the farther we're separated from source.
We're also not going to react very well with, I don't know, to our environment. Or there was a whole discussion on the site today. I don't get any reaction when I'm walking around in the
Mhm.
community right now. I'm very happy and all that, but some other people are fearful, and if they're like psychic, they can feel other people's things and then they don't feel well, you know, that kind of story. They're not centered, eh?
Well, they were basing it on that magnetic thing that's going around, from what the
Oh
shedding.
yeah, that whole thing, but
Yeah.
but
I don't, yeah.
And I think that when Doc, when you ask me why does it matter to me, right? Because I think that in that instance or situation, people are like being victims, right? There's something that's happening to them on the exterior. They're not creating it. They don't see that they are creating that themselves.
Well,
And
yeah, that
and the-
fear, they're
yeah.
attracting that, yeah.
And the question is, are we actually creating that, right? Are we creating that reality for ourselves within our thinking and our mind? Because if God is both good and evil or bad and good or whatever the duality that we speak, what part of that do we want to manifest into this reality? Or are there other factors? Right now, just looking at Walter Russell, that's what we're doing in the Secret Light book.
Mhm.
He's just saying that we get this relationship between man and God, if sought and listened in the stillness and the quiet, is the only relationship that we need, is the only relationship there is. And past that, everything else is created by us.
Mhm. But that connection between us and the higher, that
Here between this,
unless you work at it on a regular basis in stillness,
mhm,
it has to be built
mhm.
and has to be maintained, if you like.
And that was
And
one of the answers to one of our questions. But go ahead.
yeah, well, it's like in the Bible, it talks about that invitation to the banquet. And some people, they invited, but they didn't have any light inside. They didn't trim their lamp or something, trim their light. It's got to do with keeping that light at all times lighted
But
for any situation, to be ready at all times. So I'm just saying that connection to the higher, yeah, it's important. And when you have that, and if you're more as you work every day, or you keep trying to get that connection, even when you're walking around and everything, it's, well, anyway, it's important. It's very helpful.
Yeah, and so, here's the question I was speaking of. So, and it's about cosmic consciousness, right? How does one obtain cosmic consciousness? From page 28, it says gradually. So it's not really a burst of light. It's not something that comes on,
No.
as an epiphany, right? It's by intensifying one's awareness by much aloneness and companionship with God, source, whatever you want to call it,
Mhm.
while manifesting him in every moment and in every task of life. So as we were talking earlier, like being a painter, a house painter, he sees it as meditation. He sees it as commune with God. I've been listening to Mike and Bear, and they talk about, and I've experienced it in the garden or outside, even just doing yard work. Very meditative, right? Very much of that aloneness and contemplation. So I think that what you're saying is exactly right. I just wanted to kind of show where we had covered that and how Walter Russell expressed it.
Mhm. Mhm.
So anything more on question number 2 there, which was how does thinking divide knowledge?
Well, Yannick is clapping. Well said again, William.
Well, gosh, Yannick, I wish you were here to get these.
Well, maybe he could. Yeah. Anyway, that's what he's saying.
Thank you
Clapping.
thank you so much, Yannick. It's greatly appreciated. Thank you. Okay, question number 3. What does the quality of man's thinking depend? Because we now know what we just said, right? If we create everything, and what we create from our thoughts, because it all originated with man, what does the quality of man's thinking depend? And from page 39, the degree of awareness of his knowledge, and not upon the quality, quantity, or intensity of his thinking.
what does the quality of man's thinking depend?
Well, again, if we go back to the,
Odd question, though. I know that it's missing a vowel or something somewhere.
well, again, what we're talking about here, what does his quality of his thinking depend? And so as we say here, his thinking divides qualities of the stillness of spirit. So if man's not in contact with the still magnetic light, but has other factors influencing his thinking. And again, this is where I'm saying that, do I think that there are other factors that may be out here? That may be outside this? Yes, I do believe that there could be other factors out here. But if this relationship between man and God, if this is what we seek, if this is what we nurture, what magnetic pulse are we looking to influence the quality of our thinking? Are we watching a bunch of junk on TV? You know?
Exactly.
I mean, do we have thoughts about how stupid people are or how they're dumb?
Yeah.
Do we have thoughts about, because this one's not as enlightened as I am, then, that's going to affect this quality out here. And that is what we actually are going to manifest in our thinking, which is going to create the wave, which is going to create the reality.
Hopefully.
So, and I think, when you ask Giselle, is the body, what does the body have to do with it? Well, if we're poisoning ourselves with food or toxins or whatever, or unintentionally getting poisoned, those will have effects, right? If we're eating sugar, too much caffeine, I know that even Bear and Mike talk about meat. I'm a little bit on the fence on that one, but
They do eat meat though, don't they?
I think they eat some. I don't think much. It depends. I mean, I know that for Mike, he talks about that it actually kind of clogs your ability to have spiritual experience. But when I read the Bible, Jesus ate a lot of fish. I know that.
Well, in what I learned, and I've experienced for myself, when I was, I guess, not that I was thinking about it, but it just happened. Like when I was preparing for something, I went more vegan, vegetarian for a while, and then once that was passed, I could, it's not a black and white thing. When you need to clean out to be able to receive something of a higher nature, if you like. It's not like that. It's so you could be eating fish and it's not that important, because what's important is, I'm not saying it's not important, but it's not that important. There was too much emphasis on that in the past. So
well, I think Jesus said it best. It's not what goes into a man that makes him unclean. It's what proceedeth from his mouth.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? It proceedeth from his mind. So with that, I think that's the quality of the thinking. What are we putting, what is this pulse that we're taking in? Is it the magnetic pulse, or is it a degraded pulse that we're putting into our mind? And I know that Santos talks a lot about alcohol and spirits. I'm not quite sure with him though, because he seems like mushroom and marijuana and things, but he doesn't really like alcohol. But
he actually recently though, he was talking about just yesterday. Something's going on with him though. He seems to be really off his.
Yeah, he's well, Mike has mentioned it on the co-op side or whatever. I mean, when we have meetings, if you had time, I'm just saying, obviously he's gone through a lot, and maybe at this time he's in a certain space,
No, he's gone nuts.
Well, it's possible. I mean, we've heard about a lot of, I'll say a guru, I'm not saying he is, that they can all go off the path sometime just because of whatever experience they're having, and then hopefully they come back in alignment. you know, so it can happen to any of us.
Well, without a doubt. I mean, he's lately that you've been, saying things that you'd never think you'd hear from such a person. And
Well, there you go. But I mean, he's, you shared
Heavy
some
ego.
great videos that he was teaching
Yep.
people. It was amazing. So, but everybody has, there's always some times when things like that can happen for sure.
So what we do to this physical body, since it is a receptor and sensory, can affect the quality of our thoughts. So with that, back to question number 2,
Right.
3. It is, so what does the quality of man's thinking depend? And it is the degree of awareness of his knowledge, and not upon the quality, quantity, or intensity of his thinking. So say like when we see the Rodin statue of the thinker, where he's got his hand on, he's just thinking away. Is he really getting anywhere?
Mm.
Can we think our ways out of our problems? Or is that an illusion and it really comes back to just being still and seeking the small voice of God, from what Walter Russell's saying?
At the last seminar that I attended in person last year, well, a couple of years ago now, I guess. He always gives us this teacher that we have for meditation, for consciousness, things that we can kind of think about. Like he kept saying, well, while you're doing things, try to still your mind where you're not thinking about anything. Okay, times in the day, or you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Because that's when, not that he said that's when the good stuff is going to show, but that's what he was just saying, like not to be slave to always be thinking about something, you know?
Mm-hmm. And that is the craziness, right? That monkey mind that we've heard about, that's always constantly chattering at us. And this is where materialism has led us.
Oh yeah.
Into this, massive thinking, and we're constantly thinking,
Mm-hmm.
and we've stopped knowing. And that's, like I said a few years ago, when I got my kind of download on the Akashic intelligence, where what Akashic intelligence is just pure knowing from God. It's that we don't. That's my definition of Akashic intelligence,
Mm-hmm.
where, because I was into AI, artificial intelligence, which is not intelligence, it's information. It's really artificial information, not artificial intelligence, because there is no knowing within that. Within Akashic intelligence, there is knowing,
Mm-hmm.
knowing from God.
Mm-hmm.
And I think, and it kind of came from me also when I was reading the Bible, that all the craftspeople are brought in to build the tent of meeting and the Ark of the Covenant and these type of things. All those craftsmen, God just downloaded to them how to do that. There was no books out there on metallurgy they could go read or do anything. It all came directly from source of how to do that. And if that was available then, is that available today? And what Walter Russell says is, yes, that's available today. And that is the only knowledge that's real.
Wouldn't that be neat if this knowledge, this teaching or this book was taught to young students, eh?
Mm-hmm. Well, I think Bear actually said that it kind of was, where that quadrivium, where he was taught how to think, not to think, and not what to think, but how to think. And that, so Bear's, I think, 67, maybe. And that's when he was being taught the quadrivium, which was from, I think, Plato. And then that all went away. And then the education system changed to be just repeating back facts
Mhm.
and no longer seeking this quadrivium.
I know that when Zoe went to the Waldorf school from nursery to grade 8, you know, you could give her a white page and she could create things on that page. You know, it was, I like what they did. You know, I like what they were, you know, about. So never going to be scared about a white page. They can create anything. Just, you know, I'm just saying. That's not how we learned when I was in school. There was a lot of rot and repetition for sure.
Mm-hmm. So that's the degree of awareness of his knowledge, and not upon the quality, even the quality of his thinking. So if he, you know, has good thinking, the quantity or intensity of his thinking. Okay, so for the last question is, why can't idea be produced in matter? And again, I had this on the slide. Idea is cosmic. Conception belongs solely to the magnetic God light and never becomes matter, from page 39.
Becomes matter.
So, I mean, within this, are we saying that the idea is cosmic? So from God, it is in our knowing, this idea. And the idea, since it is magnetic, magnetism can't, are we saying that magnetism can't form matter, that only electricity can form matter because it has to be a wave, whereas as the magnetics, the pulse?
Well, to create a baby has to be an electric spark or something. So
Mhm.
when you see those, or when you read about magicians or Gandalf, or, you know, you could just see them with their hands, or, I'm sure there's, if we could see what comes out of those hands, or that picture you gave us before, or the sign. The other thing is, it's interesting just being able to make a sign with your hand, which affects everything. That's the mudras and those things that we know.
Mm-hmm.
I just think this is fascinating. And people that are into Reiki,
Mm-hmm.
they learn these things. And by doing that, they're able to effect a better effect, I guess, or, you know, anyway.
Well, and Yannick is writing that God's thinking is only electric, his mind is magnetic.
Oh,
So
there you go.
So the mind is the pulse and the thinking is the wave. And so the wave. So this is, so why can't idea? So idea is mind, idea is cosmic, mind is cosmic. But thinking is electric. So conception belongs solely to the magnetic and never. So this is strange, right? Because when we talk about a baby, as you were talking about earlier, we call that conception. But is conception actually promoting the zygote or the baby or the fetus? And is the conception actually the field of the consciousness that's created prior to the baby being manifest?
Yannick says
Mhm.
something there.
What he's saying is I think that he's saying that matter cannot manifest idea, but idea can manifest matter. So
Yeah, that for sure.
yeah,
I agree with that.
it can't, but it also says here that conception belongs solely to the magnetic God light and never becomes matter. So I think that's a little bit different when he's saying that there's something that has to happen between idea and matter that
Well, according to the book here. Okay, yeah, idea is cosmic and cannot be produced in matter.
Mhm.
Idea must be conceived in the mind,
Mhm,
and the mind meaning the big mind, the big M,
mhm.
before it can be simulated as as product. So
So
well, we know that everything everything that is created that is true or in harmony, like you said, comes from what we can access in the knowing.
mhm,
And it's like the blueprint, it's like the pattern, it's
Mhm.
the better pattern, I don't know what to call it, but
archetype, the
yeah,
archetype.
so it comes from there. So whatever we manifest had to come from a big idea, you know, if you like.
Mhm.
But if you just look at matter, you can't generate an idea from matter. That's what I guess.
Well, and that's getting back to the cause and effect, right?
Yeah.
We
Yeah,
can't rationalize from effect. We have to
which is what
Open thought.
scientism is right now, but
correct,
anyway. Yeah.
correct.
Well, that's what they do, but they're lost into the material, to the minutiae material, which Steiner had said would happen, if people go that way.
Hmm.
Yeah. They've lost their way to find the cause of anything, really.
I'd had this other diagram that I actually had saved too, and I don't know if it's pertinent or not at this time, but what it's showing here is that construction of one cycle of electric current. So it's going through electric potential multiplies in accord with Einstein. So it's just kind of showing this equation of this mind and motion in the universe. And
Jeremy would like this one.
yeah, and it also actually has the musical notes down here.
Because, you know, the musical note thing, the color. There's so much to learn,
And there's a lot to learn. And one thing that I also brought up that I had as a diagram, that I had as a slide. Let's see here. I think it was this one, which is kind of cool. I don't know if you've ever seen this painting by Walter Russell, where he says, "In the wave lies the secret of creation." So we have the wave, right? He's talking the wave, and we know that the wave is electric. So within that lies the secret of creation. And one thing I put up here was I just did a search on Redshift Blueshift. And this was a description that says that Redshift and Blueshift describe how light shifts towards shorter or longer wavelengths as objects in space, such as stars or galaxies, move closer or farther away from us. The concept is key to charting the universe expansion. Visible light is a spectrum of colors, which is clear to anyone who looked at a rainbow. When an object moves away from us, the light is shifted to red, end of the spectrum. Now, I added this radiation because that's what Walter Russell talks about as it moves away, and it's red, which is the female side, and its wavelength gets longer. And then if an object moves closer, the light moves to the blue end of the spectrum as its wavelength gets shorter, which is gravitation. So this is when we look back at the diagram that we were talking about, and I have this redshift, blueshift. So the redshift is as things are moving away in radiation, and the blueshift is gravitation as things are moving closer. So that when you look at the wave, and we're talking about a sine wave here, right? Which goes up and down like this, which is also the serpent. And as that length of the wave, the amplitude of the wave, and the length of the wave, which is time, those will create how we actually manifest this spectrum as red or within red or blue. So that's more of a discussion on the wave itself. But the reason I bring that up is because Walter makes the statement that in the wave lies the secret of creation. And that goes back to our question, which is,
I like this, this picture and if we reflected on that, you know what I mean? If we would ponder on this, I think we'd get a lot from just that one line that he gave us, right? Anyway.
It's like a tie-dye t-shirt.
I have a tie that actually almost looks like this.
No,
Really?
Yeah.
I just love it. That's it. I want one of those.
well, you
So
can
what are
actually
you-
send that to.
So what are you eating, Doug? You're eating something interesting?
Yeah, food, sustenance. Piece of banana.
Okay, good.
So I think we're about done with today's. Is there any more comments on anything that we've talked about? Any
No,
follow-
I love this diagram. It's gonna be, I'm gonna have to put it on my desktop.
Is
No,
that
but you did send it in the Telegram. I can download it on my desktop.
Yeah, yes.
I could look at it.
But
in
it's
a
not
bit-
quite, I'm gonna upload a new one because I actually have a new one that actually has a little bit more to it, which I think is better.
Well, fine, an improvement. That's fine.
Yeah, I was been working on this all morning as I thought about it more and more.
Great. I've never really, except because I'm in this Walter Russell study group, I never really looked at Redshift Blueshift. I mean, this is all new for me.
Yeah, me too. Yeah.
But hey, hey, that's what we're here to understand that.
Yeah, so I think this is the latest diagram I have, which I actually added a few components to. So I put here as magnetic as pulse and electric as wave.
Oh, I like that. Yeah. The pulse thing that you keep talking about.
Yeah.
That's good. That's good.
So I added a little bit more to it. So let's see, I think what he's saying is, okay, matter, okay. Yes, sorry. So there seems to be an order. Idea uses two lights of thinking, which produces the effects of matter. Yes.
Okay.
That's pragmatic. So thank you, Yannick. Thank you. Thank you for
Wow.
from commenting, even though you were at work. It's been very helpful. So I think we're going to wrap it up for today. Any other comments or follow up or?
What I like to read in advance because listen, I mean, up till now I'm all caught up, but I'm just like, what are we reading for next week?
Well, I think I had the original scope here. I would read.
I'm sure, but
I would probably read the next two chapters, I believe. Let me see if I can find that real quick.
because I usually spend Tuesday and a bit of today to kind of, because I've never read the whole book, so I'm reading only about as I'm following this. So
I think I'd put this. I'll get back to you on that. What we were.
oh, that's
gonna-
fine. I'm just saying I'm not gonna do that tonight. I'm just saying as I get closer to the next meeting, I
Yeah.
read it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I would probably read the next two chapters because it seems like we're pretty much good on 1 to 2 chapters. We're not getting really through too much more, but I think that this to this point has really got us into a really good follow up and idea of where we're going. We've got, at least for me, I have a better handle on it now
Oh, yeah.
than I did when I was starting, and so because I know that as we move on, this whole chapter, this whole
Mhm.
part 1 has to do with intelligence, right? I mean, with omniscience.
Okay.
Then we're going to move into omnipotence and omnipresence. So this is really just about knowing right now.
Okay. We're really getting it. I'm getting it.
Mhm. All right. So thank you both. Thank you, Aunt Leannick, and
Thank
I
you.
will I will record. It's being recorded, and we will post it. And when I post it, I'll put on what we're going to do for next week.
Cool.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Thank you so
William.
much.
Be good, guys.
You too.
Good night.
Good night.
Good night.
Good night. Don't say goodnight too soon because I have to get.
Bye,
get out of
Yannick.
here.
I'm gonna say bye, Yannick. I don't know if you'll get it before it goes. Here we go.
Here we go. There we go. End. There we go. End meeting for all.